No? Take this. Take this.
Okay, I got it. Ooh, that's on.
Joe Lauro, man. Oh, that was so great. Okay, how many years has this taken?
Well, we cut it for a year, but there was a 15-year prequel. I mean, before we got to the point of being in the editing room for many, many reasons, there was a lot of stops and starts, getting permissions, and you know, and then Katrina came, and it was a you know, I usually work pretty quick. I'll do a film in 6 months, never much longer than that, but this one just went on. And what happened is we would get the permission from one person, but then the other person changed their mind. And a lot of the concert footage came from this one place, this French concert that happened in 1962, which was extraordinary because it was the entire band. That was the band that played on all those records, all the rhythm and blues records that came out in New Orleans. That band was on. And, you know, unfortunately, not too many African-American, or for that matter, too many rock and roll guys at the time. You never really saw them beyond like maybe one song on a TV show or some bad rock and roll movie where they're lip syncing. But this is an entire 40-minute concert. And when I found out about that concert, I said, well, I've got to make this film. This was before I had given up prior. It was the first round of trying to do the film. I'd forgotten about it for 4 years. Then we saw the concert, and I go, okay. My energy came back, and then it took me 5 years to get the French guys' permission to let us use the footage. And then when I'd given up again. And then I got a call from the French archive, and they said, well, Jean-Claude has decided that it is okay to use his film. I said, oh man, I don't know if I can do this again. So I looked at the footage again, and I got my enthusiasm back. And because that's what it takes. I mean, you're really digging into people's lives and looking for all kinds of places to find the material. It's a lot of work. And if you don't have the enthusiasm to do it, because you're certainly not getting enough money, if you don't have the enthusiasm, you know, why would you do it?
And you went and visited Fats Domino. Yeah,
several times. Early on, I became friends with him a bit through, there was a lady that was briefly interviewed, Ade Ellis, who's his best friend. She kind of takes him to the doctor, and he's a bit of a hypochondriac. She takes him to the doctor, the good doctors, right? Because she's a Southern belle, you know, and not the Ninth Ward doctors, but the good doctors uptown. So, you know, and he loves her, and the whole family does. And she kind of introduced me to him because she had seen a film I had done on Louis Prima a few years back. And that thus began the friendship and trying to convince Fats that I was, you know, going to do the right thing. I mean, these rock and roll guys in those days, if you didn't have a bag of money, cash, I mean, literally, a brown bag full of cash, you weren't getting in the door, you know. And Chuck Berry, all those guys, that's the way it worked. They were so used to getting ripped off by promoters and ripped off by record companies. So, you know, these suspicions of years and years and years. Here's this guy wants to make a film. Okay, well, show me the money, you know, which I didn't have. So I had to kind of charm him over 10 years. Wow. And finally, you know, I was allowed in the house. We got to interview him. But unfortunately, by that time, he didn't have too many memories. He could, anything on the piano he could play. I could say, Fats, play the introduction to, you know, Mardi Gras in New Orleans. He'd do it. And he'd just sing every song, anything, the most obscure stuff. But he couldn't tell you much about his career or his life. He kept saying to me, do you know Alan Freed? I said, Fats, well, I am from New York, because Fats knew I was from New York. I said, no, I'm sorry, Fats, Alan Freed is no longer with us. Oh, you know, then 10 minutes later, Joe, do you know Alan Freed? Yeah. So this is the point that I had gotten to Fats. He's in great health, but, you know, living
Does he
very
have dementia or Alzheimer's?
Well,
or
that's what it is. Yeah. He's got you know, he's got that long journey into the dark, you know.
Right,
he's
right.
in the middle of right now.
And speaking of long journey into the dark, after Katrina, he lost his home, right?
Well, yeah, that's the whole thing. I was talking to my friends about this earlier. You know, you hear about Katrina and all the horrible things that happened and the lost lives, but there's another part of it too. And like with older people that were uprooted, you know, when you're 80 years old, you don't want to move. You know, I mean, these people, like I would go to Fats's house in the lower Ninth Ward. it was Fats's world. He'd be there like 9 o'clock in the morning, boiling crawfish. His friends are there. They're playing cards and, you know, all kinds of hubbub in and out of the house. Boom, Katrina, it's gone. And now Fats's house got built again because he had people that helped him. He had some money, but he was living in a really poor neighborhood. So they rebuilt his house, but there was nobody in the neighborhood. There was no reason for him to move in. His friends were gone. They were dead or they had moved out of town. So he moved in with his daughter in an absolutely beautiful sort of suburban place, but it was very different. And that's when I think Fats's dementia really accelerated at that point.
We should mention that this had a previous screening, I mentioned, in New Orleans just about a month ago.
About a month ago, we premiered it in New Orleans, and it was great. It was the closing night feature of the New Orleans Film Festival, which is really, that was really kind of where I wanted to show the film, because I figured the people in New Orleans would definitely enjoy it. And I was really honored in that Fats actually showed up. I had the first row just as close as that. I had Fats Domino, Dr. John, and Dave Bartholomew sitting there, all of them. And
a little pressure there?
Yeah, and I tell you, when it comes down to it, I didn't care. I mean, as long as those three guys and their families liked the film, I didn't care anything about what the critics or anyone would say, because I made the film for them. I made it for their heritage, for what they gave this world. And the greatest thing in this country is our music. It's beyond segregation and all that crap. It's about making people happy and connecting through sounds and rhythm and words.
Right.
And that's what that man gave the world.
And you see, ironic, the signs that we saw that they were carrying, enough with police brutality, and what goes around comes around,
that's right? And
Amen.
it ain't over.
And so, what did Dr. John say?
He said, one of the reporters went up to him and said, Mac, his name is Mac Rabinick. I said, Mac, what'd you think of the film? He went, slamming. I'm going to use that, right? Slamming, one word.
Slamming.
You know, he liked it anyway, so I felt honored about that. For sure.
How old is Fats now?
He's 86 years old.
And Dave Bartholomew?
Dave is going to be 94 in a couple of weeks, actually. Yeah.
Oh my God!
Yes.
I'm just wondering. He made an awful lot of hits. This was terrific. And did he get the compensation financially? I mean, is he?
Unlike a lot of his contemporaries, Fats was very wise in that when he was given the standard deal at the time, is either we'll pay you a lot of money for each session, or you could. You know, we'll pay you a little, we'll give you this royalty thing. Fats went for the royalty. So unlike a lot of people that got burned big time, you know, Fats did quite well with that. And not only that, he wrote the songs. Him and Dave, they kept their publishing for a long time. So better than a lot of the rockers from that period, and certainly better than the rhythm and blues people. Fats did pretty good that way. Made a smart decision.
Why do you think he was so upbeat all the time? And where did that come from?
I think that was the man. You know, hey, look, you know, I chose to talk about Fats's career for the reason that the man is still alive, his family's still alive. You know, everybody has a life and everyone has dark in their life. And some people focus on that stuff or even balance the story. I really just didn't want to go there out of respect because I felt the music was enough of a story where I didn't have to talk about, well, he did this, he had that problem. And, you know, we got into it a little bit, but he was just that way, just a really good-natured, warm fellow. And people know that. There's an honesty in his music that comes from his soul. You know, and I think that that's apparent.
So you deliberately avoided anything more personal?
I did, and not only that, but even if I wanted to go there, none of his bandmates would talk about that stuff out of respect for him. So I couldn't get, if I wanted to get the, quote, the dirt, which I didn't, but I just know that none of the guys that I talked to were ever going to go there. You know, it was hard enough getting Billy to tell me the story about Papoose ODing. That was hard enough to really talk about, hey, you know, these guys were major rock and roll people. They were on the road. They were very, very popular. They had all sorts of interesting things happen in their lives. You know?
But it does kind of beg the question, because it was a tough time.
Yeah, well, there you go. I mean, and you know, I interviewed Fats. We talked about that with Fats a lot, but Fats always said, you know, it was like, Fats, when your movie, The Girl Can't Help It, big movie, big Hollywood movie. Where were you? Where'd you see it? In New Orleans. I go, did you go to the movie theater? Yeah, I went. He had to sit in the back, in the top. That's where Fats sat to see his movie, you know. So he didn't want to talk about it that much. He said, we were just used to it. You know, now Herb Hardesty was much more into talking about it and being a bit more, more radical about it, and really it bothered Herb a lot because Herb was educated in a different way. He was a Tuskegee Airman. You know, he went to college. You know, Herb is a very sophisticated man. Fats, not to say that he's not, but he just did not want to go there. He accepted that stuff, but so many people did. If you didn't, you had a lot of trouble. You know, so Fats had to play that game. He's selling out an arena, and he's got to drive 50, 100 miles to find the place where he could sleep. That's not so long ago, folks.
Any questions? Other questions? Anyone for Joe, Laura, anybody?
Howie.
When you got the sound and the movie for the concert, where'd you get the sound part of it from? How'd you match that up?
For the main concert stuff, it came with it, but what we did is we sent it to a really good guy that was actually able to turn it into a stereo mix, where he was able to separate. It was just really mono, one camera, but this guy did it really, I don't know how he did it, but he did a really great job with very little, because, you know, this wasn't very sophisticated the way they filmed those live concerts back then. So it all came together at the same place.
How about the audio tape interviews with Fats? What year?
They were done, the one that we mainly used was done around 1985 by Rick Coleman, who is the author. This was the problem. I mean, again, when I decided to make the film again, I couldn't really interview Fats. And any of the interviews that I would find were just very, very basic, you know, simple things, because he just never liked to talk that much. You know, he'd be on the Merv Griffin show or the Mike Douglas show, and they'd be joking about his rings and how many children he had and all that. But there was never any substance there. So I was like knocking my head against the wall, and I said to Rick, you must have taped Fats for your book. And he goes, in fact, yeah, I got some audio tapes. We found these tapes, and that was the treasure trove of Fats interviews that we were able to edit and clean up and use as the narrative that you hear with Fats.
Where is this going to go beyond Hamptons
I don't know.
Take Two?
I'm hoping. Well, I really would like it to be in the American Masters series. I think that Fats is that, and I think I would like that very much. I don't know that I'll get there, but that would be a fulfilled dream if it got there.
And is this a first on Fats Domino?
There have been a couple of things on Fats that really have just been like concerts of him as an older guy that had tiny little bits of his background. But this is certainly the only film that gets into any depth about, you know, his life and where he comes from and all that.
Wow.
Yes.
And all of the still images, that's from all of your archive?
Well, I tried to do as much stuff with the resources I had in New Orleans as I could. But we found the Historic New Orleans Collection was a wonderful museum. If you ever go to New Orleans, visit that city, go to that museum. It's just fabulous. And I hit them in Tulane, the jazz archive there. I know these people, and they were very, very helpful in allowing me to go through everything and find things. And then, you know, we'd find things at the National Archive, and lots of little historical societies around the country would have things. So if we needed like shots of like segregated hotels, black hotels from that period, we would just search all the Southern historical societies and find images that way. Yeah.
And you can tell, I think, through this film, the passion that Joe Lauro has for the city of New Orleans and its music.
Well, that's part of the story. I always say that the story is about Fats Domino, Dave Bartholomew, Cosmo Matassa, and the city of New Orleans, because those are the four major components that were going on, I think.
And your love affair with New Orleans began How long ago?
I guess, the first time Karen and I went there was around 1990, I guess. And we've gone every year, and I've had the privilege of working there several times on several different projects. So it's kind of like almost like a second home. I go there a lot. Yeah.
And then, or second line, second home. And then bringing it here with your band, the Hoodoo Loungers.
Well, yeah, we play a lot we try to play a lot of that music. We're a pale imitation of the real thing, but we try to get a bit of the spirit of it, for sure.
Do you think you captured the spirit of Fats Domino? Do you hope?
It's so weird because it's hard for me to even look at it as a whole because it's a patchwork of so many little pieces and things that we manipulated. But I think well, what do you think? I don't know. You feel that you know a little bit about Fats? Oh, good.
Bravo. And we hope to see this on American Masters sometime. But thank you, Joe Lauro.
Thanks
Great
a lot,
job.
folks. And thank you, Jackie, for having us here. Okay.